Just got done eating my morning ice and I'm ready to go. And Bitcoin has crashed $5,000 since we last spoke. Crazy. Recovered almost more than half of that actually before the day's end. And the real question is it all over? Should we end it all? Should I end it all? Should I end my life? I don't know. But Bitcoin's gone down, man. I can't deal with it any longer. It's still somehow above $40,000. But more importantly, today we're going to be going over a couple setups and also some Thursday statistics as well. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Starting off right in over here with the Thursday statistics. And Thursday, as always, well, I don't know if it's always gonna be like this, but when we are on Thursday, we should always remember that it is the most likely day, historically speaking, for Bitcoin to close negatively. If we looked at all Thursdays in Bitcoin's past, 35.5% of those did close negatively for an average loss of about 1.71%. And that is actually interesting because it's actually the lowest negative return that we see on a weekday. The weekends actually do have slightly less, which I don't really actually know how to square that circle in that case. Like, why would it make sense for Thursday to be the most bearish day? And it actually has, well, the least bearish return as far as real trading days go. I don't know if there's necessarily any real analysis to be done on that, but ultimately, yes, today does have a higher probability of closing to the downside. But as we're going to visit in a second here, or in maybe a minute, well, there's a little bit more complication to that picture that I think kind of adds some nuance to what's likely to happen probably over these next, I would say, 2 to 3 days. So in this case, we do see that Bitcoin did get the sell signal on the 4-hour time frame, right off that first major bar that we did see bring Bitcoin down to about $44,000. Obviously, there was another $4,000 of continuation from there. In this case, we haven't seen a take profit based off the Oracle Pro, but I would imagine that if Bitcoin starts to trade a little bit more sideways here, you will naturally start to see at least the first take profit. Because I mean, that's a pretty decent move. I mean, you can't get too greedy on something like this if you are following this indicator both to the upside and the downside. I mean, it did catch this move all the way here from about just under 43 to, yeah, I mean, basically that first major dump from yesterday. So fair enough. All right, moving on now and kind of putting the puzzle together a little bit better, understanding that Thursday is the most likely day to close to the downside, but does have the lowest negative return. And to put that into perspective as well, what would, about 1.5% off a current price action look like to the downside? That would put Bitcoin back down around about 42,150. Well, if we go on over here at the 4-hour time frame, actually did fire off a bit of a setup. It looks like, at about midday yesterday, at least midday, compared to my Helsinki time zone, at an average price of about $43,000. So pretty much where Bitcoin is at right now, just a little bit lower to be fair. And in this case, that does suggest that there's a higher probability of a bounce from this region over time, probably not today, but over time. So looking at this, what I'm inclined to say is that while Bitcoin probably does test some downside today, maybe back down to like low 42, maybe even a little bit below 42 as well, ultimately Bitcoin's more likely to hold sideways here. I don't think that we're going to see any major continuation from this. Now, I don't want to get too carried away with things because, I don't want to be called like just a blind boolah. But ultimately, and believe me, I do enjoy being a lot more bearish than I am bullish, but I'm not getting the signals just yet that suggest that it's wise to be bearish like immediately. I do think that if things are going to end up being bearish from here, it's going to grind it out probably for at least half week to a week from these, from this region. But in this case, this particular setup does suggest, again, that there is a higher probability of a bounce out of 239 closed trades in the past. Let me just see. I think it's the past 5 years. Yeah, going back to 2018. Yeah, 2018. Holy shit. Maybe it goes back a little bit more than that. Yeah, about 2018, in fact. This particular setup has provided a nice win rate of just under 65%. So not super high, not super low, kind of like the Goldilocks zone right there. But as you can see from the equity curve, it's been very, very steady since, 2018. So that is getting close to 6 years now, of tested history. And what I'm looking at right here is not only, a higher probability of a bounce, but how long would that likely take to play out? And what would the average return based off this setup particularly be? And if we go over here we can see that the average amount of bars and trades is 26. That's 26 on a 4-hour time frame. So 26 times 4 is like more than 125. Or sorry, more than 100. Just trying to do some bad mental math, but I don't know, like 104, something like that. Anyways, yeah, the average amount of bars in winning trades was 22. The average amount of bars in losing trades was 34. So if this is going to be a winner, then we would expect this to take a few days here, really. Again, 22 bars on a 4-hour time frame is what? 22 times 4 is 80 plus 8, 88. So how many days is that? A little over 3 days. So if you are bullish, you're probably looking for Bitcoin to grind it out sideways here for another day or two and then try a bit of a bounce. And in the meantime, that can very easily mean that Bitcoin retests, you know, maybe even somewhere around yesterday's low. I do think that today probably does test, you know, just based off of Thursday statistics, somewhere down around low $42,000. But of course, you know, it's really where things close out at the end of the day. So ultimately, what would be an invalidation of this particular setup suggesting that, hey, Bitcoin is most likely to see much lower? Well, we're going to actually have to reference another setup for that. But I'd say that this particular setup is certainly invalidated if we start to see Bitcoin go below yesterday's low. I mean, I think that is quite obvious, especially on a closing basis. That would be quite concerning for the boo laws there. But until then, you know, sideways above that region is going to be interpreted as setting up for a nice bounce. And if we reference the average winning trade here, the average bounce was about 3 3.75%. Same thing with the average losing trade as well. So let's see what that would look like on both sides from that entry. Well, almost 4% to the upside from here would put Bitcoin back at around $44,500. If we were to shave off almost 4%, where would that put Bitcoin? That would put Bitcoin at about 41,300. Not even on new lows, actually, which is rather interesting. Doesn't mean it can't get continuation from there, but just putting these things together, what's most likely for today? Most likely for today, Bitcoin overall sideways, maybe with the test to the downside, to like low 42, maybe even a little bit below 42, something like that. But assuming that Bitcoin just doesn't break down in the next 2 days, I would say, a bounce from these regions is a lot more likely. And if it starts to take more, longer than that, especially like 5 days ish, it's more likely to be a loser as far as as far as the setup goes here. So now we can start to put things into time frames with returns. That's what I like about this kind of shit. And by the way, you can set this up with a skeleton key if you are so inclined. I did just post this setup in the Discord there, so you can reference that if you have the skeleton key. All right, sweet. Now, what's next? Okay, also on the topic of... Okay, actually, it's not there anymore. Bastard! Okay, so also on the what was going to be on the topic is that the 3-day time frame did still have potential for hidden bullish divergence here. It actually still will. It's just Bitcoin would need to close at the end of the next period above $43,000 for that to be confirmed. 2-day time frame, daily time frame. Do we have the same things? Same thing basically right here and right here. So I don't really have anything new to be speaking about right there. And we see a nice little bounce off the 55 exponential moving average, but not really getting much else from that. Anyways, yes. Okay. So what's the last thing I want to end on? Well, actually, no, we're not ending just yet. Daily time frame, just looking at the HPDR bands. Let me just make sure that these are my regular ones. Okay, yes, indeed it is. We can see the bottom side of the current blue 50% of historic returns range low is just below $41,000. So I'd say that that's likely a good backstop for this whole formation resolving bearish, meaning that if Bitcoin does start to close below $41,000 or just below there, actually, we can expect we can expect Bitcoin to probably pull back another 20%, honestly, 15 to 20%, I would guess. The reason why I said that is the same thing as before. In Q1, at some point, whether it's earlier or later, high probability of a major pullback, to the tune of 25 to 40% overall, as we do get closer and closer to the halving date. So the real question is, does it start from here? Did we just see the high yesterday or the day before and things work their way sideways and downwards from here? I'd say that really only gets validated for me if we do see a closure below that region. But as you can see, volatility is still kind of expanding over here. So things are in motion. Things are certainly in motion as of right now. But directional volatility is pretty fucking neutral. I mean, not very helpful right there. Obviously, Bitcoin below the median is going to favor the downside as far as this goes, but with volatility looking like that, I'm not super concerned about this particular day. And the median, by the way, is just above $43,000. So I'd look for Bitcoin to kind of, oscillate around there. Of course, also, I did just want to revisit this setup here too. I know that we're getting a little bit late in this video perhaps, but the 2-day time frame setup from yesterday, because Bitcoin did not close above, or actually it hasn't even closed at all, but did not remain above where's my damn pivot? Yeah, 44,300, which was the major pivot from yesterday. This technically will favor the downside overall, but because Bitcoin did come back down into range yesterday, volatility is still contracting. So the sort of assumption yesterday that, volatility having just this very quick spike here was suspect, I do believe was correct. I guess we still have like 15 hours left to find out. And, we can very easily eat those words very quickly, especially after a day like yesterday, when you can see how things when you can see how fast things change, even within less than a day span. But ultimately, this setup will technically favor the downside as long as Bitcoin is below this pivot right here. But the setup is irrelevant as long as volatility is not expanding, and right now it is not, and it will not as long as Bitcoin is basically below 44,500, let's say, to the upside, and above about 41,000 to the downside. As long as Bitcoin's within that range, this is just a potential in the background letting us know that, hey, the next 25% ish move is still still being decided, and the direction of the stochastic oscillator will likely give us a high probability of whatever direction it's going to expand towards. So in this case, it is going to favor the downside as long as it's below this region. We'll see how that changes coming into this next closure right here. But again, volatility won't expand as long as Bitcoin's within that range anyway. So it makes it kind of difficult as well. It's just, it's always going to be in the background there. It kind of reminds me back on over in October and September when volatility was very, very low. And we were kind of, watching the direction of the stochastic oscillator to judge, hey, is this going to be the one? Is this it? And I think that we're kind of in a similar area over here as well. So yeah, that's a long way of saying sideways overall, most likely. Maybe Bitcoin has a higher probability of a bounce, within the next about 3 days, a little bit over 3 days, 3 to 4 days. If it takes longer than that, probabilistically speaking, it will become more and more bearish. So Boo laws are once again kind of on a ticking time bomb here, but I suppose we'll see. It is, of course, Thursday now, so I'm just trying to think. That would give us what? Okay, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So yeah, basically by early next week, if Bitcoin hasn't made a nice bounce back above $44,000, that's at the point where you're probably going to see me start to turn bearish on this channel and say that, hey, there is a very strong possibility that that was the high, and this is the major pullback pre-halving that we've been kind of speaking about. That is likely in Q1. It's just right now, it's not quite there just yet. And actually would still technically favor the upside as of right now. Actually, I probably shouldn't just because of this right here, but sideways likely the name of the game. So yeah, that's where I'll end things. Okay, as always, I want to wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow for Friday, the end of the week, baby. Take care.